The biggest surprise last night was?
I think to most people would be Michael Porter Jr. sliding to Denver. Look, he's got. I mean, the injury issues are there. You know, whether it's a back or a hip, those are things that really scare people off. And then, you know, there's just a sense of kind of entitlement and arrogance there, to which, like, hey, dude, you played 3 games in college. Like, let's take a breath here. You know, I think, you know, he comes from a really good family, and his dad's done a great job protecting him from the real world. But, like, you know, when you're raised in a bubble and told that you're great, sometimes you start believing it a little bit too much. So I think him sliding was a surprise to a lot of people. Not as big a surprise in NBA circles, but a surprise because he was some people's number 1 prospect or number 2 prospect in the country coming into the year.
But I'm also fascinated, Doug, that you have to get to a certain point where you say that Michael Porter is worth the risk. So maybe not worth the risk at 8 or 7 or 9, but then you get to 14 and then he becomes worth the risk. Like, at what point does a guy who has question marks around him health-wise become worth the risk?
Well, I mean, Denver's a perfect example, right? Like, they have Jokic is a star. I mean, Jokic is the best player in the NBA that most non-NBA fans have never heard of. So they already have a nice little roster, some really good players, Gary Harris. So they don't have to depend upon him. If he flames out at 14, like, all right. Whereas, you know, like Atlanta with Trae Young, they're going to build they're going to trade their point guard. They're going to build the whole thing around him. If he fails, everybody gets fired, or at least the coach gets fired. So I think it depends upon where you are drafting and how much you're depending on this player to come in and help you. I'm not sure if I'm like, look, I love Colin Sexton. I thought he was the best point guard in the draft. And I love that Cleveland took him, but I'm not sure if I'm Cleveland. If I'm losing LeBron, if I wouldn't have taken a swing, that's a home run swing for Michael Porter Jr. because if he's healthy, you know, if he gets humbled a little bit, I mean, that he can be an all-star. Whereas I don't know if Colin Sexton is an all-star as opposed to just a really, really good point guard. So, again, I think it's franchise dependent, it's roster dependent, and then it kind of depends upon your GM and how confident they are that if the pick fails or if his body breaks down, you can survive it. You know, like Philadelphia, there's a team that could have taken a swing at him, considering they've taken, even with the previous regime, they had taken injured players and been willing to sit them for a year. But remember, if you sit them for a year, that's going to be essentially 2 years without playing basketball. That's not a good sign for how his body's going to hold up in the rigors of the NBA.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV or download the Dan Patrick Show app.